It off with the pasuk that discusses at the end of the parsha of Kefal, where the pasuk says, "Al chamor, I'll call dvar pesha, al chamor, al se, al salma." So these are the protim. Al kol aveda sheyom rekuzeh, at hu Elohim yavid var shneim, asher shin Elohim yishalem shnayim l'reihu. As an aside, what we learned from Ad Elohim that Yehovah Dvar Shneim is that it means B'shua, and we learned that because we learned from this pasuk that I just quoted is in the parsha of Shomer Chinam, but in the parsha of Shomer Sachar it says specifically Shvuas Hashem Tia Ben Shneim. So that's how we know that Ad Elohim means a Shvua. But we learned from the Klal Prat Klal to include all the different things that somebody might steal. Then the Gemara ended up saying that, no, I think that's what the Gemara blind over here at the end. Oh no! So then the Gemara ended up switching to a different limud, because we had a machlokes if the pasuk that we just quoted is referring to Ganev and Toin Tainis Ganev, or if it's referring to Toin Tainis Ganev only. So the Gemara said, if you learn that one is Beganev, I'm sorry, that's what we have. According to the Mandam, will hold that both Psukim are Toin Tainis Ganev. The Gemara needed a makar that a regular Ganev pays kefil. So for that, the Gemara went to a different klal part of klal from Chizkiah, and Chizkiah was focusing on a different pasuk that says that's referring to a ganev mishar at chamor atzeh chaim shnayim yishalim. So Chizkiah made a klal prat klal out of there to learn that by Geneva as well, even without a shvua, there'd be a chiyuv of kefir. Okay, so that was the brisa we did yesterday, and now the Gemara is going to drill down a little bit into that brisa, or going to drill down a lot of it. It's really going to deconstruct the whole brisa. Omar Mar, and this is going back to the Gzera Shava. I'm sorry, to the Klal Prat Klal that Chizkiah brought from the pasuk of Ganev. Avim himotzei timotzei biyodei hagneva mishar ad chamor atzeh chaim shnayim yishalom. So Amar Mar, we're just getting ready to start. Yoimar shar ugneva. It could have said im himotzei timotzei biyodei hagneva. Sure. Why did it have to say ad chamor atzeh chaim? All it had to say was im himotzei timotzei hagneva at shar. Now, right off the bat, we have to acknowledge that the Gemara seems to bring up something interesting. Amar Mar Yomer Shor u'Geneva. If you look at the pasuk, it actually said Geneva before it said Shor, right? It says Geneva, and then it says Mishor. So that's something that the Gemara is going to point out, and that will have an impact on what we're doing over here. So Amar Mar Yomer Shor u'Geneva. Frank Gemara Miksiv Shor u'Geneva. Geneva v'Shor hu. It says first Geneva, and then it says Shor. If you're going to tell me that what does the Chizkiah mean to read into the pasuk is ilu nemar ka'amar, meaning ilu nemar shar u'geneva. If it would have said shar u'geneva, if the pasuk would have been written differently, then you would have a pratu klal. Freik the Gemara, that wouldn't work, because umi matas amrit. Would you be able to darshan a pratu klal and treat it as if it was a klal pratu klal? Amrit, what did you say? Ma prat mefurish. What does that mean? Have a shor prat ugeneva klal, and that's all you have over here. And then it would be a pratu klal, nasa klal moishev ala prat. So right away from here you would know everything. There's a rule of darshaning psukim, and one of the rules are called klal pratu klal. If there's a prat that's surrounded by a klal before and a klal after, we say that the only thing that's included in the klal are things that are similar to the prat. So not the prat only, things that have similar characteristics to the prat, like dover hamatalto of gufay momoin, right? Shor is a prat. Geneva is a klal. So if I only have a klal on a prat and I don't have a klal after the prat, that's a different thing. That's already a klal of prat where we say ein b'klal ela mashiv prat. So if you only have Geneva b'shor, well then what's Chizkiya's whole drasha? There's no makom to make a drasha. Then shor would be the only thing that you have to pay kefal for. Zok to Gemara. Il nemer shor Geneva mimot is amrit ma prat mefurish. Okay, I'm sorry, we're going back there. Mikziv shor Geneva v'shor dichsiv. V'chitem il nemer kamar il nemer shor Geneva umi matzos amrit. Would you be able to say ma prat mefurish? Have a shor prat u Geneva klal. If it said Geneva first, I'm sorry, if it said shor first and then it said Geneva, then it would be a prat u klal. By a prat u klal, what do we say? Prat u klal, nasa klal moisev ala prat. The klal is moisev ala prat, and it includes everything. This arabalahu kol mili. So Vaita, you don't have a klal prat u klal for Chizkiya to darshan anything that's similar to shor or a set. Ella kidichsiv ka'amri. We have to say that Chizkiya is darshaning the pasuk the way it says it, and that is Geneva v'shor. But if it says Geneva first and then shor, like it does say, and there's no concluding klal, mi motus amrit akol b'klal, or ma prat mefurish, you would have to say havale Geneva klal v'shor prat, and now it's a klal u'prat ein b'klal el mashiv prat shor in midachrini loy. So our problem here is all we have is one klal and one prat. However you want to configure it, you're not going to have a klal, prat, uklal. That is the problem that we have. Zok to Gemara. I just want to, we had a very good shot over here. I believe Rashi says it somewhere. We're going to get to it. Exactly the mechanics of klal, prat, uklal, what each one does, what the first klal does, what the second klal does, and what the prat does. So I just want to see where I thought I believe in Rashi. So when we get to that Rashi, we're gonna learn that inside, because that's very it's a very enlightening Rashi into the mechanics of a klal, prat to klal. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. So we're stuck now. Omer Rava. So Rava said, and Rava's sort of reconstructing and changing the whole meaning of Chizkiya, Tana Achaim Kasamachle. When Chizkiya said, Yomer Shar Shavik Neva Chol B'Chlal, all these cases, it all is relying on the following, the ending klal of Chaim. Tana Chaim Kasamach. So it says, Imimatzei Timatzei B'Yodei HaGeneva Mishar At Chamar Atzeh Chaim. Chaim is the final klal. Problem is, Chaim is only Bali Chaim. So that's what we're going to have to get into. So Amar Rav Tana Chaim Kasamachle. Klal Prato Klal Ka'amarle. And he is working with the principle of Klal Prato Klal. So let's see Rashi. Achaim Samach Geneva Davale Klala Kama Samach Le Achayim Dahave Klala Basra. And therefore we could now darshan v'darsh b'chlal u'pratu klal. The Sefer de Katani. But the last part of the brayso that we learned, Yomer Geneva Shor V'seh V'chamor V'akol b'chlal. If it said Geneva Shor V'seh, we would know all different animals. Any type of animal that you can imagine would be included in the chiyuv to pay kefil. The problem is Hoyel V'achayim Samachle. If we're relying on the final klal of Chaim, my kashale, what shver? Hatvei like siv. It doesn't say anything else. So let's have a look at that point in the Gemara, because this is a very, very important point. Okay, here we are. Yomer shar v'chamor v'seh u'geneva v'achol b'chlal, and I would know everything. Zok tomorrow, and therefore, if I would know everything, then the only if I have another pasuk, it will tell me that I can even include oifis of nevela, oifis of trefa that don't become tameh at all. So ilukach hayisi I would have said ma prat meforsh balechayim av kol balechayim. Right? Ma yesh lachavi. What do you want to be marba? Shar balechayim. Kishu omer chayim, when it says chayim harei chayim omer, it's already included balechayim. Almani mekayim geneva, the rabbi is called over. The problem over here is this line in the Gemara is talking about chayim as if it's one of the protim, right? Since I have an extra prat of chayim, it already includes all balechayim, so it must be that it's also coming to include kol dover. So Zok Rashi, that's going to work very well if Chaim is one of the protim. But if Chaim is the klal, you can't be the rabbi's kol dover, because Chaim is the klal, which means it's the most inclusive, and the prat is actually going to minimize from what the klal is, because only things that are alive, not inanimate objects. Sure, could be, sure, and that's how we were understanding it until now. So Zok the Gemara. No, prat can mean anything that limits the vast scope. Like Geneva would include everything and anything. It's pretty fast, but it reduces what the klal is referring to also by a lot, because it's not going to include anything inanimate. So let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara says we're relying on Chayim as the final klal. If the Geneva is found by the Ganev, Misharat Chamor Atzeh Chayim Shnayim Yishalem. So what do you pay kefil on? Anything that falls into this category. So Zokim Amarava Tana Chayim Kosamachlei Uchlalu Prat Klal Kamlei. Break the Gemara, but we have another problem. V'aloidomi Kol Basra LeKol Kama. As Rashi says, the Klal Kama says Geneva. It's everything and anything. But Chayim D'Loi Chayil Elabali Chayim LeChlala Kama Demashma Kol Davar. So the first klal of Geneva is mashma everything. The second klal of Chayim is limiting. So you can't make a klal prat klal when the first klal is so vastly different from the second klal. Zok Gemara, actually, we want to say that maybe Chizkiah holds like the Tana Devei Bishmol. Ha Tana Devei Bishmol who the Chahai Gav Nedorish Klal Yuprat. He does darshan a klal luprat klal even if the klalim are very different. Okay, and then this is the Gemara's Taina. This was the Gemara's Taina. If it would say, Mishar at Chamor Atzeh Chayim Shnayim Yishalem, we don't have anything extra. We don't have anything extra at all because we needed every one of these pratim and the final klal. So what's the Gemara's kasha? I already know it already. The Gemara said if it said Chamor Shor Sheh, I already know everything. I already know everything. So why do I need a prat of Chaim? It's not. I don't have a prat of Chaim. Chaim is the klal. So what was the Brisa referring to? What was the Brisa referring to when he said Hamai ani mekayim Chaim? Right. Av kol b'chaim ma'ashech avishar b'chaim kishuar b'chaim b'rechaim amar. What's the kasha? Kishuar b'chaim b'rechaim amar. Chaim is the klal basra. It's not an extra prat. Zok to Gemara, and this is literally changing everything. Im himotzei timotzei lamali. That's the problem. So even though the words that the Brisa says, why do I need Chaim for? That's not really the kasha because we need Chaim. That's the last klal. Really, it's asking why it says im himotzei timotzei biyadei akneva. That's an extra lotion. So it's so difficult to understand this because Rav is saying that when the Brisa says Chaim Lamali, it means Imimati Timoti Lam. So that's a little bit difficult to understand. Imimati Timoti Lam. Zok Rashi, what is our point? Imimati Timoti the mashma ribuye. Himati Timoti is mashma to be very inclusive. Now Rav is going to explain the whole Brisa of Chizkiah in a new light. And we're going to go through it step by step. Yoymar Shor u'Geneva v'Chaim. It could have said Shor, Geneva and Chaim, v'Kol b'Klal, and everything would have been included in the Klal. Okay, Ilu came, but if that was the case, so Imimatzei Timotzei is what we're going to be making now into the two Klal. So again, Yomer Shor Gneva V'Chayim Hakol B'Chlal. Okay, if it would have said that, Hayis Yomer Ma Prat, which is Shor Gneva and Chayim, Mefurish Davar Akar V'Lagab Mizbeach. These are things that can be brought Lagab Mizbeach. Afkol Akar V'Lagab Mizbeach. Ma Yesh Lahavi. What would you include in this list of pratim that's not beferish mentioned in the list of pratim that we're only adding because of the klal prat of klal? Set. We would add set to the list. But the problem is it says beferish in the pasuk. Kishahu Omer se haresa Omer. So once again, Hamani Mekayim Geneva. What am I learning from Geneva? In other words, how are we broadening the scope of what's included in the Chiv Kefel beyond the list of the pratim? It's the rabbis called over. Zok to Gemara Yoymar Geneva Vishar Vise V'Chayim V'Kol B'Chlal. Let it say Geneva Vishar Sef Chayim V'Kol B'Chlal. Ilukain, if it only had these items in the list, Hayisham would have said Ma Prat Mefurish Davar HaKadosh B'B'Chayra, because Shar and Se are Kadosh B'B'Chayra. Av Kol Davar HaKadosh B'B'Chayra. So Oy Bazoi, what would it include? What would the Klal Prat include in the list of things that are Chai for Kefil that are beyond Shar and Se? Ma'yesh L'Chavi Chamar. It would obviously be including Chamar. But the problem is the Torah Beferish lists Chamar. So what are you Chamar for? Yishom Chamar, Re Chamar Amar. Amani Mekayim Gneva the rabbis called over. It must be that we're including everything in the rule of Kefil. Yomer Gneva Vishar Viseh Vichamar V'Chayim V'Kol B'Chlal. Zoktamar again. Ilu Keni Yomer Ma Prat Mefurish Balechayim. I would have thought just like the Prat is Mefurish Balechayim, Av Kol Balechayim. Ma Yesh Lach Lahavi. What are you going to be adding to the list of pratim? Because once again, the klal prat, the klal has to broaden that list. Shar Balechayim. The problem is it lists Chaim as well as a prat. Yishoemer Chaim Harei Chaim Omer. Hamani Mekayim Gneva the rabbis called Davar. So there I have everything's included now. So this seems to cover off whatever we need.
Did we already ask why you need all three prats? You have the klal of Chaim. Why do you need
Yeah, we just went through that. We needed that you shouldn't limit it to something that's called b'mizbeach. You shouldn't limit it to something that's called b'chayra, right? And you shouldn't limit it to something that's chai. So once we have everything figured out over here, the problem is imi matzeh timatzeh lamali. So why do I need imi matzeh timatzeh? Okay, so zok to Gemara. So what extra we learned from matzeh timatzeh? We already learned from the rest of the pasuk, without any other help, we've already learned that there's a chiyuv to pay, kefil on anything, whether it's chai or not. Zok Gemara, ihachi shaper kashalei. If that is what's bothering, if that's the underlying thing that's bothering the Dvei Chizkiah, so what is the teretz? Zok Gemara, mishum de islay pircha. At the end of the day, we need himatzeh because this klal prato klal using chayim as the final klal has a problem. What is that problem? The rabbis called over mecha kamaisla. At the end of the day, what did the Gemara say? That since from Shor Chamar and said we already know all Balei Chayim, why is the klal broadening it? The last klal is Chaim, right? We're working with Chaim. So the first one is Geneva, the last one is Chaim, and the question is, how are we broadening the scope of what's Mechuyev and Kefil beyond the list of Shor Chamar and said? So Zok Gemara, we're broadening it to include even non-Balei Chayim. But frankly, Gemara, how could you include due to the klal even more than the klal itself includes? Because the klal itself is restricting it only to Balei Chayim. So frankly, Gemara, the rabbis called over Mecha Kamasila, Mechlola Basra from the word Chayim, Klola Gufei Chayim Ksivbei, and therefore, klal prat klal my kamahanile. All I have to say was Chayim. Once you're using the last prat to include everything. So all I have to say was Chaim. Elamai, and you can't say that because of the klal of Chaim, it includes even more than Chaim. Because the way a klal prat, the klal works is the klal says go beyond the scope of the prat, but you never go beyond the scope of the klal. So if the final klal is Chaim, how could you possibly say l'rabbis called over? Ilasuya called over. How could it be? HaChaim ksiv, the most inclusive language, which means the klal says Chaim. And that would mean Balei Chaim in Midei Achrini Loi. So that was the problem that was underlying here, that was bothering Tvei. And how could we possibly use this klal prato klal to include even non-Balei Chaim? Mishum Hachi Itzrich im Himatzeh. And now it reconstructs everything. Because now in Himatzeh, Timatzeh are the two klalim. Himatzeh, Timatzeh. Which is very weird. Because normally you're used to seeing the pratim in between, sandwich in between the two klalim. Here we have two klalim side by side, im Himatzeh, Timatzeh, followed by the list of pratim. So that's going to open up another problem. Amri vashnei klalis t'smichi adadin in it. These are two klalis that are back to back, and they both precede all of the pratim. Amar Ravina, that's not a problem. So we're tapping into every different shita out there to make this price work. When you ever have two klolas that are back to back, insert pratim that you find later on in the pasuk in between those two back to back words, in between the matzah timatzeh, v'doinam b'chlal prat. And therefore, shadi shar b'ni matzah timatzeh. Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. Here's where we have our pivotal Rashi over here. So let's look up a Rashi. The rabbis called Dover Me'echem Aisala Michlal Basra. The last cloud, which is Chaim, is what you want to use to broaden from the list of pratim and include even non-Belei Chaim. That can be because Klal Gufa Chaim Ksiv. Claim is Dr. Rashi. Itzrich Imimati Timotzi. You definitely need Imati Timotzi to act as your two klolim. Dimignevi v'Chaim Darash to Klal. If your klal is the klolim that you're using are Geneva, which is fine, but Chaim is the problem on. Where do you always learn things in addition to the prat? So here's where we need to understand the mechanics of a klal prat to klal. Because you might say, yeah, you're right, Chaim is limited, but Geneva is not limited. So learn it out of the first klal to expand it beyond the scope of live things. So Rashi, if you understand the mechanics of a klal prat to klal, you'll see that it's the final klal that's the most important to be inclusive items that are not in the list of pratim. So Zok Rashi, Michlala Basra. Where do you expand from the list of the pratim? That's the klala basra that does that. So you need the klala basra to be inclusive. The av kol klala gufe chaim sife. The whole klal says chaim, which means you can't expand past chaim. The chalheicha de dashin and klalu pratu klal. Af kol, you know what we say when we say ma prat mekorish davar hamatal b'guf moment. Af kol, so too will expand it to other items that are not on the list, but have a similarity that it's davar hamatal b'guf moment. So the af kol, where do we get that af kol? Why do we have the ability to include things other than those actual pratim? It's miklala basar midrash. We learn it from the last klal. That's why the last klal is most important. The klala kama lemute hudasi. The first klal is being memayit. Why not? Why is it being memayit? Because let's say there was no first klal at all. Let's say there was only a prato klal. The balav iu have a prato klal. What would the halacha be if it was only a prato klal? This rabbi kol mili. So kum techaysu mahani klala kama lemute. The first klal actually is reducing the scope of what we're including. Because if we wouldn't have had it, we would have included everything. The purpose of the first klal is to exclude from the list things that are not similar to the prat. You know where we have the signal to tell us to add more items to the list, even though they're not listed specifically. If they're at least similar, that you know from the klal basra. The lav iu, if you didn't have the klal basra, what would it have been? Have like klal prat, then the klal mashav prat. So you see that the final klal is what's inclusive. So if the final klal says chaim, how could you possibly include more than things that are chaim? You would never be able to include more than balei chaim if that's what the final klal is. You'll lose your whole limit of the klal prat to klal. The darish tanadvei b'shmol the alma klala the loydami. Yes, Rabbi Shmuel holds you don't have to have the klal that's doim. Geneva is more inclusive than chaim. Even if we could look away from that, but you can't tell me that you're marbe from chayim more than what is chayim. So therefore, this whole klal prat klal is ogeschlagen, because there's no way, if the final klal is chayim, which is the ultimate, most inclusive part of this whole sequence, and it only includes balei chayim, there's no way you can include shar dover. Because of that, we have to use himotei timotei, and in fact, timotei are the two klalim, and everything else is a prat, shor, chamor, seh, and even the chayim is going to be a prat. And now the Gemara goes through the Bryce again using this new discovery. So Zok to Gemara. Shadi shar ben himotei timotei. The first prat that we're going to place between the himotei and the timotei, lasuya mai, ilasuya balei chayim. If it's to include balei chayim, mechayim nafka. It says chayim beperish as one of the pratim, so I don't need shar to tell you balei chayim. Ela lasuya davar she'ein balei chayim. It must be shar, which is an extra prat, is coming to tell me that we include in the chiv kefal even things that aren't balei chayim. U'deroi shachi, and dash in this way. Ma prat mefurish davar amataltal l'gufei moment. Just like the shar, it's mobile and it has its own intrinsic value. Af kol davar amataltal l'gufei moment. So that's how we learn. That's how we learn that even not balei chai, there's a chiv to pay kefal for. Visu, and then let's go one step further. Shadi chamar ben himotei l'timotei. Let's see what the chamar is going to tell us. Lasuyimai. Eli suya davar she'ein balei chayim. We already know that mishar nafka. Ela lasuya davar mesuyim. That teaching you that only a davar mesuyim, at least according to Wamshat, only a davar mesuyim is going to be a chiv kefalon. And we had already yesterday machlokes Rashi and Tosfos what a davar mesuyim is. Rashi was a davar mesuyim means something with a siman. Tosfos says it means something that you can quantify what the loss was. It's because it's an extra prat. Just because it's an extra prat. How does shor include not balei chayim? Shor is a balei chayim. It's only because it's extra. Why does the Gemara pick these lamudim? That's why there's no course, there's no book called Drushes of the Torah for Dummies, because that's what we need our rebbeim for, to tell us what to pick, because we would be able to pick anything. That's right. That's right. That's why we need our Messiah, because otherwise we'd be flying blind. So what do I need seh for? Ella, now we're going to do a complete turnaround, and now we're going to say that this was no longer a klal prat to klal, rather ela riba umiyat v'riba. This is no longer a klal prat to klal, because if we dash like a klal prat to klal, we're not going to have anything to be learned out of the word seh. So therefore, we're going to dash it with riba umiyat v'riba kedetana devei b'shmol. So we're completely changing the pshat in the Vechizkiah here. The Tana devei b'shmol. It says b'mayim base pomim, and this is the pasuk that talks about what fish we're allowed to eat. So what does it say in the pasuk? Ezeh toichlu mikol asher b'mayim, kol asher loi snaper b'kaskeses. If it has fins and scales, b'mayim in the water. Now waters include any type of waters, but b'yamim uvan nechalois, those are pratim, because those are saying that we're only discussing fish that are in rivers or in lakes. But what about if I have a ditch? What if I have a dug out pond? Would those also have those same rules? So Zok to Gemara, Rabbi Shmuel learned from B'mayim, Ein Zeh Klal Prat. He doesn't darshan that with a klal prat. Ela riba umiyat, v'riba hakoil. So let's first take a small detour to see how Rabbi Shmuel darshans the pasuk by what fish we can eat, and then we're going to apply this riba umiyah to our pasuk over here of a mimotzi timatzi. So Zok Rashi, the Tana Dvei Rabbi Shmuel, b'mayim based pamim, v'logashin kol mokim. You're not darish the words kol mokim shenemar. Logashin kol mokim shenemar, and then we have another gears to change. B'mayim, because we have riba mitriba, so I don't see how it works. B'mayim, where's this lamed? It's a little bit further down over here. Ksiv b'mayim. Okay, it says ksiv b'mayim. It says b'mayim toichlu kol asher b'mayim. And what can you eat from kol asher b'mayim? Kol asher lo yisnaper v'kaskesas b'mayim. Hoil l'klalim smuchameim. Because if you look, the klalim of mayim are mentioned before it says Bayamu Vanachol, right? It says is that Bamoyim, Kalash is not Bamoyim, right? So we have the two klolim of Bamayim before the pratim of Bayamim Uvanacholim. So that's exactly similar to what we're saying. Since the two klolim of Mayim are close to each other, and the pratim are after the two occurrences of the word Bayamim, Ksiv Bayamim Uvanacholim. So it says Bamayim twice, and then it says Bayamim Uvanacholim. The mashma, the Yamim Unacholim, who the Be'inon Snapper Vikaskesses. Where do you need to have the simonim of Snapper Vikaskesses in order for a fish to be tar? That's if you pull it out of a yam or out of a river. If you pull it out of a bar or a covered bar, loy, there you can eat any type of fish. You wouldn't be restricted to call sheyesh le'snapper v'chaskesses. So ein ze nidrosh b'chlal prat. We don't darshan this with the klal prat method, the loyless rabbi ela ke'ena prat, where we would only include things similar to the prat in the rule. Ella, the way we darshan this pasuk is with the function of ela bariba umiyot fariba. Visraba kol mili. When it says bamayim, it means to include any body of water that you find a fish in. It has to have fins. It has to have scales. El demit mahani lamute purta chada milsa v'sulay. All we will be mamayit from the requirements of this pasuk is one thing. I don't know what that one thing is by fish. I didn't look up the Gemara, but with that approach, we're going to now take a new look at our pasuk of mimotze timotze biyada agneva. So let's have a look. Zok to Gemara, Riba Kol, my Rabbi Kol Mili, meaning everything would be included in the Chiv to Pekevel. Break the Gemara, Ihachi Kol Hani Prati Lamali. Now that you're saying it's a Riba meat for Riboy, so then the Riboy includes everything, and that solves all our needs. You're Chayiv Pekevel no matter what you steal. So why do we have Pratim here? What are they teaching us? Chad Lemute Karka, one to tell us that you don't pay Kevel for Karka. So it says Shor Chamor Seh. Once again, how do you know what to apply to what? Oh, sorry. So Tosfos asked that kasha. One of the things he suggests is if you move your border over to your neighbor's field, so you're stealing karka. So Chad Lemute Karka, the Chad Lemute Avodim, the Chad Lemute Shtaros. So you have Shor Chamor Seh. One's Lemute Karka, one Lemute Avodim, one Lemute Shtaros. But you still have Geneva and Chaim, right? Those are also extra words. Geneva and Chaim are combined together as one to teach us L'chidarav, the Amar Achia L'Keren Kein Shekon. What if you steal something and it deteriorates? Can you just give it back in its deteriorated state? No. The Gemara teaches us later you have to give it back in a state that was similar to what it was when you stole it. As Rashi says, Achia L'Keren Kein Shekonav, L'Kamon. We're going to learn that soon. If you stole a behemoth, and the behemoth got weaker, or animals dropped in value, you have to pay an animal that's valued exactly like the animal was valued at the time of the gneva. I'm sorry? Correct. Meaning you have to bring back the keren that you stole to life and restore it to its condition as it was and its value as it was when you stole it. Now let's go back. Up until now, we were all explaining that if both psukim in the parsha of Toyin Tainis Ganav are referring to Toyin Tainis Ganav and not to Ganav, how we know Ganav? How do we know Ganav? From the new pasuk of Mimotzi Timotzi B'Yodei Gneva. Now we got to go back to the Cheshbon again. What if you already know Ganav? Because it's included in the psukim of Toyin Tainis Ganav, because there were two psukim there, right? In Mimatzei Ganav and Lo Yimatzei Ganav. What if already Ganav is included? The Ganav Atzmoi Nafkalei Mimatzei Ganav in the parsha of Toyin Tainis Ganav. Hi Imimatzei Timotzi my Darshpe. What's he going to do with this whole pasuk that we just spent almost a blot on figuring out how you know that there's a chiv kefal by everything? We already know that for the previous psukim. We have a whole extra pasuk. So my time of the Rav, the Amar Moed B'Knas v'Achach Bo Edim is Potter. Rav holds that if you're Moed B'Knas, you're Moed that you stole, and then Adam come along and say that you stole, you don't pay kefil anymore because you were already moida. The from this pasuk, imimate timate, meaning imimate be'edim, if you're found out only through Adam before you were moida, then timate b'dayanim, then the dayanim are going to fine you the kefil. Prat le'marshias atzmai, if you incriminate yourself, even if Adam come later, you are going to be part of and paying kefil. Zok to Gemara, that's a very important limud. Ulaman da Amar tarvayi b'toyin tanis ganav. If you hold that both psukim by toyin tanis ganav are referring to toyin tanis ganav, the high imimati timati mapikle the ganav atzmai, and now you have to rely on what we just learned from Tanav Echizkiah, that from the pasuk of imimati timati you're learning the chiv kefil by a regular ganav. Marshi asaminola. How is he going to know that moed v'knas is potter? So tomorrow he will know from the Asher Shion Elohim. If Bezdin convicts him, but not if he convicts himself. The he uses the pasuk of Imatzi Timotzi to say that you can't pay kefil if you're made on your own. What's he going to do with Asher Yishin? Hi Asher Yishin, my Darish pay. Amalach, well, he has a different drasha for that. The potter. Weren't we just talking about Moed B'Knas Potter? No, because there's two things, Akrash. There's Moed B'Knas and no Eidim come, that you're Potter. And then there's Moed B'Knas, V'yach Bo Eidim, is Potter. So the Mandamar has two psukim, Asher Yishin and Imati Timotei, one to be Prat Mashiach Atzmai, and Asher Yishin and Timotei Timotei to tell you Dafka if you're Mukhliv with Eidim. He holds that even Moed B'Knas V'yach Bo Eidim is Potter. If you only have Asher Yishin, then Moed B'Knas is potter. But if Adam came later, you'd be chayiv. Madamar Tavaya b'toyin tanis ganav because over Moed B'Knas v'ach bo Adam is chayiv. Beautiful. Zokimor l'manda mechad b'ganav v'chad b'toyin tanis ganav. The nafkalei ganav mehosam. He learns ganav from the parsha of toyin tanis ganav. Bishla b'mati timotzei lichad the Rabbi Bar Hiloi. We already said in Mimati Timotei teaches you that Moed B'Knas v'ach bo Adam is potter. Aval kol hani prati lomali. It says in Mimati Timotei b'yodeh geneva. We don't have any purpose for that. We only found a purpose for the word imimati timotzi to tell you only if Adam convict you, then you're chayiv. But what about all the rest of the pratim in the pasuk? So for that we have the Ton of Shmuel. Ton of Shmuel, whole parsha shenemar v'nishnis. Sometimes you have a parsha that's repeated, like this halacha that a ganav pays kefil. Why was this parsha repeated? The whole reason why this whole parsha was repeated was the Torah wanted to teach us that Moed B'Knas v'achach bo Eidim is potter, and that's why it started with Imati Timotei. And even though it repeats everything all over again unnecessarily, the Torah does that if there's even one extra bit of information to learn. And in this case, there was a very important bit of information. It was the drasha of Rabbi Bar Hiloi that Moed B'Knas v'achach bo Eidim is potter. Maybe the Ganav himself would have to make a shvua in order to be mechuyev in kefel. Zok to Gemara, as Rashi asks, ve'ema Ganav atzmai lo yishalom kefel achi yishbal sheker. Why? Hoylem mikroy de la'il naflon Ganav atzmai. Where are we learning Ganav? According to the Mandamar who holds that one's by Ganav, one's by Toyin Tanis Ganav, then we know Ganav from the case of Toyin Tanis Ganav, there you need a shvua. So how do we know that you could be chayiv kefil even without a shvua? Zok to Gemara, Amrit loy kachoy. No, I'm sorry. Loy talkadai. Ganam should do shvua. The Tanya, Biakabaymer Shnayim Yishalem. It's shaloi b'shvua. Atam shaloi b'shvua. Maybe it means the Ganav would have to swear first and deny that he stole it. So the Gemara answers to that. Amrit loy kachoy. It can't be that way. What do you mean it can't be that way? Amar Abaye, because shnayim yishalem beganev. Why did it have to say chaim shnayim yishalem? Why did the pasuk have to say beferish that you pay shnayim by a ganev? We could have learned it with a kal v'chaymer from Toyin Tanis Ganev. Uma Toyin Tanis Ganev. The Be'atera also le'odei. When he originally got the chayfetz, it was given to him because he was a shomer. So he got it legally, and still Amar Kral Lishlem Trey. The Torah said you have to pay kefil. Ganav Atzmoi, to be Suras Liyadi. The Ganav, how did the object get into his hand? Illegally. He seized it, he stole it. Like Kolshkin, surely he should be chayiv kefil. So why do I need Elashalom Yishalom the Chazav Rachman the Ganav Atzman Lomali? If I know through a Kalvachayim from time to time this Ganav that a Ganav pays kefil, why do I need the Shnayim Yishalom repeated in the parish of Kedeva? Afilu Shaloi B'Shvua. Even if the Ganav didn't swear, he's still going to be mechuyev kefil. Is that what the Imimate tells you? That is potter? We need it for something else. Yodai. It says if you found the Ganav right-handed, you found the Ganeva in his hand. I would only think that there's a Chiv Kefil if they literally find it in his hand. What about Gagai Chatzer B'Kafif Minayin? And Tosha says, what if it never was in his hand? What if he shooed the behema to go into his chutz? So he never had it in his hand. Gagai Chatzer B'Kafif Minayin, that'll be chayiv kefil even if he steals it in a fashion where it's never in his hand. So the problem is you're learning imotze to say imotze b'dayanim, imotze b'eidim b'dayanim. We need imotze to tell you that whatever method he steals it in, he'll still be chayiv kefil. So tomorrow you can extract both limudim from imotze to matze. Why? Because it could have just used a double lashon, and we would have had our klalim. Midashani cross, since the Torah used himotze timotze, he used two different words, we can extract the extra piece of information. Shemami natarti, sai b'moedim knas v'achak b'oedim is potter, and sai that no matter how he gets the object, even if it never ends up in his hand, he will still be chayiv b'kev. Okay, we'll stop here. These are very technical, dry Gemaras, but they're part of the mechanics of the Chiv of Kevel. If somebody ever asks you, how do you know that a Ganav is Kevel? Say, oh, you don't want to know.
I'd rather this